Hey, here we are, lunch with the astronaut. And as you can see,
A lot of memorable moments, but that was one of them. Was just like we got back into orbit safely, and we all just kind of like, as soon as we got into orbit, we all just kind of let out this big cheer. And, you know, we had like 20. We said, okay, we'll give ourselves 20 seconds of celebration. So we all kind of just like hugged and went crazy, and then we got back to work. But that was one of them, and I think for just about everybody, it's that first glimpse of the Earth from space when you get into orbit for the very first time. That's something special too. But, a lot of special moments, but those are two that really. I was on 2 flights that were secret missions, actually.
Oh.
Tell us the secrets.
I probably don't even remember now. And then that second mission was the first one after Challenger, which was we launched some satellites, but mostly it was just kind of getting back into space again. And then the last one was a scientific mission in which we had like 70 different experiments, and we had a special laboratory in the back of the bus, back of the space shuttle, and we just did a whole bunch of physics, biomedical, plant growth. We even had some bees, or not bees, they were flies, just a bunch of wide variety of things, which was really good.
Was that the mission where some of the elementary schools were allowed to have some of their experiments taken up?
Well, on most of them, most of the missions that I was on, there were things that, particularly I remember the second mission I was on, there were things that we flew that were specifically put by students. Please go ahead and eat.
I know. Like,
So then after that, after I was a Marine aviator, and then that's how I kind of got started in. The thing is, though, you get to use, it's like, you think of this, you have the whole volume, so so you can have someone below you.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So if you were just walking, it would be really confining. But if you're use the whole space, the whole volume, it's not quite as confining. And it always seemed to me like it was. I didn't ever have that feeling. It was really a small area. And when like on my last flight, where we were. Had this great big laboratory in the back and a tunnel to float through. I mean, it seemed like I was lonely at times because we worked around the clock, and we had four in one crew. I was on the crew that had 3. We had 7 total. When we were all together, it seemed like there was a lot of people. But one guy was always up front, and 2 of us were in the back, and it seemed like it was kind of lonely.
Really? Wow.
So it never felt really confining at all. And I think it's probably because that idea that you can use all the space, all the volume.
well, in terms of with children, because we work with very small children, and a lot of times I have kids that can't even stand to sit next to her. The conflict that occurs with just having a table partner and being that close to someone because our space limitation. So the emotional part of being in a confined space, in terms of that human aspect of being forgiving and compassionate, because not everyone's going to know exactly what your needs are and your limitations and the things that, I mean, for that long to be able to know yourself so well and that other person so well, how do you prepare, or how do they help prepare astronauts for that kind of intimacy?
Yeah, that is going to be, it's going to be more and more of a problem as we have longer and longer space flights. And part of it is, sometimes, to tell you the truth, you get the crews are selected probably because of their skills, but not so much because of their personalities. And so, I mean, your personalities kind of get to be known. And there are certain individuals that are harder to get along with than others. And, that can be, even a short flight can be a problem. It's maybe not even as much of a problem during the flight as it is before, when you're trying to resolve conflicts and things like this. Certain people can be a little bit tougher to get along with. But that's going to be, they're actually, one of the things I'm working on right now is I still have contact with NASA through what's called the National Space Biomedical Research Institute, which basically is group that oversees experiments and tells NASA, here's what we think ought to be experiments for the future, or how we're going to overcome some of the big physiologic barriers that need to be resolved before we can go to Mars, for example, like
Right.
radiation, bone loss, muscle loss, and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the groups that we have is basically looking at the psychological aspect. And you can imagine, for a few days, you can kind of push through anything, but when you're talking about a long-term,
Exactly.
6
Right,
months,
right.
and then being on the surface and then coming back and doing all that, becomes incredibly important.
Exactly.
And, both from the standpoint of being homesick, I'd be up there for 10 days or so, and I really miss my kids. I really want to come back home. And I can't imagine doing that for 6 months or even a couple of years.
So what's the longest time you spent?
It was like 10 days.
Just
or so.
10 days.
So it was kind of
Yeah,
like this
you're
little
talking about
short
people in
camping trip.
6 months,
It's like,
wow.
And that was my question too. How do you acclimate yourself once you get back after being out there so long? I mean, what is that like, really?
Well, it's not too bad for those short missions. You come back, and usually within a day, when you arrive back on Earth, you're a little bit weak, and
Oh, really?
it just takes a little bit of time to strengthen up. But it gets better each time you fly, and then pretty much every time after I got back, within a day, I was out jogging.
Really?
So one of the strange things is that when you go to sleep, for probably, it lasted maybe 2 weeks each time, you'd have this feeling like you were floating away or
Like
something.
if you were on
Yeah,
a
I mean, it's like
cruise,
you close your
feel
eyes
like
and
you're
you
on the
were kind of
water.
feeling-
Wow.
And that was kind of weird because there wasn't, like, it's kind of like having a phantom limb or something, it's like, you don't,
It's like your cells have
Yeah,
a
it's like-
cellular memory of
Yeah,
the experience.
So there are a few things, but for the longer term space flights, like on space station, they have much, their muscles become much weaker, even despite trying to do exercises in space and having exercise equipment and all that. But they have a longer period of getting used to back to one gravity.
Upon reentry, were you quarantined?
Oh, not on reentry. The only missions, I think maybe they did, I can't remember if it was just once or twice. It was from the Apollo missions where
The moonwalk?
where they didn't know what they were
was gonna
bringing
back.
back. And so there was, it might have only been the first one, might have only been Apollo 11 where they did that. But thereafter, we actually had a quarantine before, like 7 days before you go out for a mission. They want to try to keep you healthy and keep you away from people that haven't kind of been screened. And so your family would have to go through a kind of a medical exam just to make sure that they weren't sick. Your kids, anybody under 16, you couldn't see. You could just kind of look through a window, or you could say hi to them across the road. I don't know if you've ever watched Apollo 13, I think it was,
Yeah.
where they show the families kind of talking to each other across the road or something. So you could see your wife, because they would be screened, but most people you were in quarantine from. They had special water supplies. One of the flights I was on, kind of ironically, they had the special water supply for us, and everyone else was where we were living down at the Cape they had a group of people that were support people, and they were drinking a different water supply, and we were drinking our own. And ours got contaminated.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
We had
Wow.
to postpone the mission because everybody got sick.
Wow.
Well, the other crew member, the other people that were helping us that were drinking the other water was fine. But,
Did they ever figure out how it happened?
I don't know if exactly what if they figured it out. I mean, I'm sure that they corrected it and cleaned it out, all that. But it was really expensive because you had to postpone. It was one of the few times that they had to postpone a mission because the crew was sick. It's usually some weather or something like that. So sometimes the quarantines work, and sometimes it backfires.
When did you start thinking or dreaming? Did you ever dream about being an astronaut?
Not
How
so
old
much.
were
I
you
don't
when?
really have the stories of this is, looking up at the stars. I guess it was probably because I grew up in a little farm town in Iowa, and I just, like it seemed like one of those things that happens to people, outside my little sphere of living. It's just like, but, my family was, my mother and father were very big on education and all that. Great. And so they really pushed me towards getting the best education I could. And so it wasn't until actually the opportunity actually was upon itself. After I went in the Marines, I went into flight school, and then after I did that for a few years, they sent me to graduate school in electrical engineering. So I went there, and then when I graduated, I went back to flying for about a year. And it was about that time that the space shuttle program began. And so they put out an announcement, to the military that we're looking for military pilots.
A few good men.
Yeah, exactly. And so, at that point, I just said, gee, I looked at what I had done and what they were looking for. It was like, well, kind of like one of those things that, you say, well, I never really thought about it, but what the heck, I'd like to see how far I can get.
Wow.
And I didn't really expect that, I was actually stationed in Japan, and a lot of hurdles had to be crossed just to get me back from there, and I had to go from where I was to Tokyo for a physical exam, and I had to fly back here, and I made one of the last interviews before they closed down for that year, and everything worked out. I got a call one day that I was picked. I was more surprised than anybody, I think, that they actually picked me.
How old were you then?
I was 29. I guess.
29.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is you had all the prerequisite skills, and with children that may not have the same, I want to be an astronaut one day, but you were electrical engineer, which meant that you went into sciences, and then, like you said, the way you prepared yourself when your parents stressed a good education. With children, we're math, science, and aerospace magnets, so it's encouraging kids to pursue, careers or education in the science, and I think that's what everybody in America right now is like, how do we get our kids to be motivated to really study hard? What would you suggest to children that they need to prepare? Because you prepared, even though you didn't know that this is what it was leading.
And that's the thing, because and when people ask me that question, they say, I want to be an astronaut someday. And it's tell me what the path I need to take to do that. And I usually tell them is, first of all, you need the strong foundation in some sort of science or engineering. But pick a field because it's something that you'd like to do no matter what happens. Don't just, don't go in the military because that's the way a lot of astronauts have gone to get in. If you don't want to be in the military, don't do it, because whatever you do, you need to do it the best you can. And that's really what NASA has looked for, is people that have excelled in whatever field. And they really don't say, well, we want electrical engineers versus mechanical engineers versus aeronautical engineers or physicists, or, there's a whole wide variety of things that are acceptable. But what they look for are people that have been able to do outstanding work in whatever field they've chosen, that are good team players, that are well-rounded. They tend to kind of, for what we were talking about before, they kind of shy away from people that just have kind of worked in a lab by themselves and not really have had an opportunity to work on teams. Teamwork is really important, and we can't have, you don't make teams out of individuals that are after their own interests, self-interest, rather than what the team's interest is, or the group's, or the agency's interest, or the nation's interest. And so those are the types of things they look for: well-rounded people that have a lot of interests, they've done well in what they've chosen. And who knows what I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. But, I could have had those same skills, and there wasn't a new program starting, and so I wouldn't have had the opportunity I did. It came along just at the right time. So be prepared for whatever you want to do to go into that field and to do the best you can at it. Because that's the way you're going to be happy in life.